My dear Diluc, for how much I have craved this date I cannot put into words. After years of not knowing your touch, your voice, I finally depart Snezhnaya on the 22nd. By the time this letter will arrive, I will sure be already en route. I cannot wait to be with you. With love. Diluc read this letter countless times since he had received it. Ever since his childhood, he had few wishes, but one of them was to finally meet you. You and him had been pen pals for more than 10 years. As a bored child of a noble family in Snezhnaya, you had decided to randomly send out a letter to one of the addresses in your father's journal, hoping to make a friend. Despite you and him never meeting, it became strangely intimate. Not that you minded, though. So when about a month ago a group of Fatui diplomats arrived, he had been cautious. The Fatui simply wanted a few crates of his wine. And while he wanted to reject them initially, their offer was about 4 times the usual amount he'd receive as payment. He'd be foolish to decline. And if they didn't pay up, he would have all the more reasons to go after Mondstadt's enemy. It seemed like a win-win to him. And then your letter arrived. He was surprised. In none of your letters to him had you ever mentioned joining the commonly disliked organization, but it made sense. If you really wanted to visit him, to see him, to be with him. Becoming a Fatui was the fastest way. He smirked, thinking about you. Judging by the stories you told him, you always were a head-through-the-wall person, preferring hard but fast solutions. He chuckled, just like the Fatui. Right now he sat in his office, hands folded under his chin, tapping with one finger at his lower jaw, thinking. He had sent the traveler on a quest to retrieve a rare flower for him, and they hadn't returned yet. He knew you liked flowers. Snezhnaya was a very cold place, so not many plants bloomed there. And the few that did, rarely were worth the effort for a noble woman. No. He had wished the traveler bring him a Cecilia, a perfect one, with no missing petals, or the slightest hint of fading. Surely this quest would take a while. However, he hoped desperately the traveler would return on time. Meanwhile, you were sitting inside your luxurious carriage. You are reading through the final chapters of the spellbook you used as a catalyst. La Signora had insisted you would go with a group of Circran mages as your bodyguards, due to treasure hoarders inhabiting the road she had chosen for you. At least it was the fastest one. Luckily, it seemed that the mages were enough to deter any attacks. Domina, a Circran mage spoke up. Yes? You said, looking up from your book. We're almost there. The mage grinned. I would get ready if I were you. Trade talks as important as this have the tendency to lead to failure if body and mind aren't ready to take it. You nodded and stowed away your catalyst. Then you took a deep breath. Your heart was almost beating out of your chest. The Fatui didn't know about your ulterior motive of meeting the man you loved. You wondered if you would feel more or less nervous if this was just a business negotiation with an enemy territory. So far you had only traded with Snezhnayans. For a long time you were nothing but a servant and scribe for La Signora. The Harbinger was a cruel leader, but somehow she had taken a liking to you. She had made you her personal handmaid. After all, despite your noble heritage, You are nothing compared to a harbinger of the Fatui. You yourself had created 3 theories as to why she treated you better than anyone else. 1. You just were that likable and cute that even a cold-hearted demon like her had her heart melt. 2. There was a debt she had with your family, and she would give you special treatment until that debt was settled. 3. This was a cruel game, and she would betray you at some point, not because you would be any danger to her, but simply to see you suffer. Regardless, now, while looking through the carriage's window, you saw the opulent mansion approach. The pride and joy of Mondstadt, the Dawn Winery. Your heart felt as it stopped beating for a full minute, the nervousness making you almost pass out. This was what your entire life had been building up to. To say your expectations weren't high would be a blatant lie. You adjusted your Fatui mask and clutched your vision. You were a pyro user, just like Diluc. That connection alone felt very meaningful to you, even though to him it probably wasn't. And finally the carriage stopped in front of the entrance to the mansion. 4 maids were positioned outside the building, awaiting your arrival. You looked outside the window and gulped when the door to the winery opened. A man stepped outside, hand behind his back, his hair long, red, and flowing. He had a gentle smile on his face and wore a black coat that reached down to his thighs. Diluc. When he was at arm's length of the carriage, one of the secret mages opened your door. For a split second, Diluc just admired your perfect form, before he bowed before you. "Milady," he spoke softly. With a smile, you stretched out your right hand for him to take. He gently kissed your hand before taking it. Such a gentleman. It was difficult to contain your childish need to squeak and fall into his arms. After all this time apart, he led you inside the manor, leaving the mages, maids, and carriage behind. His staff and your guards knew what to do, while you two went to do business inside. If they knew, however, what business it was, they probably would try to follow you inside, so you wouldn't get too distracted. Once finally alone, Diluc sighed. "How many years has it been, milady?" he spoke.
More than 10, my prince."
You stuttered, and he chuckled. "I'm by no means a prince, but I appreciate that you didn't call me a knight." You smiled. "Come, follow me into the dining hall. I've prepared a banquet just for you and me." You placed your left hand over your chest.
"You didn't have to,"
you said. But all he gave you in return was a soft chuckle. And then he gently guided you into a room to the left of the entrance hall. It was a modestly decorated room, with table and 2 chairs in the middle. On the table stood a candelabra with 3 lit candles. You sat down opposite to him. He put a hand under his chin. "You look just as beautiful as I imagined," Diluc said, and you blushed. You were wearing a flowing black and red dress, and by now you had put your Fatui mask to hang around your neck. Your vision had been worked into a small ring you were wearing on your right ring finger.
"And you?"
you said with shyness in your voice.
"You look just as imposing as I thought."
He smiled. He was about to say something, but a maid interrupted him.
My apologies, Master Diluc, but the feast is ready to be served.
Thank you, he said, before turning his attention back to you. A Mondstadian delicacy will be our meal for today, and my personal favorite. It is called Once Upon a Time in Mondstadt. As if on cue, the maid returned with a large tablet. On it was the deliciously smelling food. After the feast, you and him had decided to take a walk outside the Dawn winery, around the large acres of grapes. The sun was already setting, making the river next to the property appear like a lake of molten gold. But he already mentioned that in a handful of his letters. So for now, you simply enjoyed his company.
I must admit, Master Diluc,
you said eventually, and he looked at you.
When I first laid eyes on you, it was very difficult to hold myself back from immediately jumping.
You looked up into his face.
In fact, by now, the desire has only gotten stronger.
His face turned soft. In all honesty, milady, I feel the same way. It makes me wish that we were simpler folk, where it wouldn't be frowned upon giving in to such primal urges.
Are you sure you have never given in to your wild side?
He thought for a moment. As I said, in many of my letters I'm quite well used in dealing with the local ruffians and hilly churls and abyss mages around Mondstadt. I'm proud of my nation, and I will defend it with my life. So, when it is threatened, I see no issue in letting go of all inhibition.
Spoken like a true hero.
He chuckled. Honestly, I'd rather be a villain sometimes.
Oh, why is that?
He asked curiously. Well, to tell you the truth, the villain always gets the girl. Hearing him say that felt like a challenge, and with a grin you retorted.
Are you sure about this, Master Diluc?
He stepped in his tracks, and so did you.
Then he pulled you closer, his hands gently rubbing over your back.
His crimson eyes looked right into yours. And with an almost cheeky grin, he said, "Well then, my lady." His tone was seductive. "Prove it then." You opened your mouth slightly, as heat began to rise in your chest. Your faces came closer. You parted your lips a little further, and felt him washing over you like a wave of warmth. You curled your toes, losing all your senses, as the taste of him nearly silenced all thoughts. Your whole body tingled, the feeling of his large frame leaning over yours as his hands explored your figure. He pulled you in deeper, claiming your mouth as his until your knees gave in. By the time you had become aware of your fingers, they had already slipped into his coat and under the shirt he wore beneath. His skin was smooth and radiated a comforting heat. For moments your lips separated. You needed to say something. But your clouded thoughts were almost instantly washed away when his squeaky voice shouted over the winery's acres.
Paimon still doesn't understand why why Master Diluc would want such a boring little flower. Anyways, he must be somewhere around here, just like the maid had said.
For the first time since your arrival, Diluc blushed. The traveler's back from his mission, I see, he thought, while biting his lower lip in anger.